Chris Mann, Head of Global Safety and Security at LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Chris, tell us what initially inspired you to get into the security industry.
I mean, it goes all the way back to college as a part-time job is where I started. And then after school, I got into the hotel industry. And I think the hotel industry is great for young people because they give you more opportunities to get into roles where you can have an impact, and really thrived there for a little while. Moved from Boston to California and was looking for an opportunity to grow, and ended up getting into the corporate world.
But talk about that. That wasn't just a simple move. You're a Boston kid. You move out to San Francisco. I think you were head of security at the Palace Hotel.
Yep.
And you end up at Salesforce.
Yep.
But how did you end up at Salesforce?
There was, I spent years, whenever corporate security folks would come into the hotel for board meetings or anything like that, I was constantly peppering them with questions, looking for advice on how to grow my career. And I hit it off with Larry Russell, who is the VP of Corporate Security at Salesforce. And at the end of the Salesforce board meeting that took place in my hotel, he sent me a really nice email thanking me for all the help. And I think I counted to 10 before I hit reply. And I said, "Can I buy you lunch?" And he agreed to have lunch with me. And after a series of lunches and some other conversations, he had a role that was opening up and encouraged me to put my hat in the ring for it. And I did.
And so you start that career, you transition to that career, and now you're working for Salesforce in pretty early stages.
Yep.
Mark Benioff, you're traveling the world taking care of Mark, and then you end up, as the head of security for the whole company.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It was a journey.
I mean, I have always admired your career. We've known each other for 10 plus years, and I've watched you transition through these different pieces of the security industry. And you've done it very well. You've adopted to different leadership. You've adopted to different culture because San Francisco is a little different than living in Boston. Working in the tech industry, a little different than most industries. You got a phone call one day by your boss, Larry Russell, and I'm really curious. We've never really talked about this. What was your thought when he says, "Hey, I was at the Super Bowl and I met these guys, and we think you should talk to them"?
Yeah. Well, I think, the impetus for that was our Dreamforce conference, which I think at the time was probably around 35,000 people, and it was growing exponentially year over year. And so every year when I did Dreamforce, that was the biggest event I had ever done, right? Every year we were stretching a little farther. And it also dovetailed on an incident or an issue that we had the year before, where the way we designed the stage and the keynote room where the band was playing that night, too close to the entry points. We had some crowd issues. Fire marshal shut down access for a few minutes. Some really solid lessons learned in that moment. And I think that was a moment where we took a step back and said, we need to up-level what we're doing here. It didn't occur to us to go out and look for help from the professional sports world. But the minute you and I started talking, it became clear to me that we were heading down the right path. And so it seemed logical to bring in some subject matter expertise. And I think I was also blessed to work for a company that saw the value in that, right? And so crowd management and attendee safety really became the cornerstone of everything we did from that point forward.
I mean, because I remember that first conversation I had with Larry, and it was right after the Super Bowl in New Orleans. We had the lights go out. I mean, I'm burnt out, from being at the building all day and then going through that scenario. And I talked to Larry and Matt Wharton at the time, and Larry's like, we run this event. You should probably get involved. And I kind of looked at him and went, well, what event could you run, right? And you and I got to, you had me come out and we spent some time with you at that next Dreamforce. And I saw the magnitude of what you guys were doing, and 30,000, 35, whatever the number was that year. And you asked me to be very kind of brutally honest and provide you an assessment of what we thought you did well or didn't do well. And I did. We wrote a report, and you embraced it, which was challenging, right? Like you were leading the way in corporate events at the time, from a security posture, from everything else. Talk to us a little bit about trying to sell that into your organization and say, we're going to change how we manage this.
Well, we had started to do a little bit of that before you got there. And then again, I think that issue the year before was really transformational for us. But also to be able to say, I think it resonated with the event organizers when I walked in and said, look, I'm really good at a bunch of things. I'm not an expert at this. and we have the opportunity to bring an expert in to help us with this. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we can be a little bit more thoughtful about how we're designing the space and how we're moving people through. And then honestly, a lot of it after that was on your shoulders, right? You had to come in and be able to make that presentation and get them to buy into it. And I think that was a process that probably took a few years, right? Every year the trust goes up a little bit more and a little bit more. But really it was, I was just comfortable. I've got a healthy ego, but my ego's not that fragile that I can't look and see a subject matter expert and say, my product and what I'm trying to do is going to be better if I bring that person in.
I appreciate that. I think back to those days in our first ops center that we built, and I told you I'm going to chain you to a chair instead of letting you run around the event. And you bought into it, but then to get your marketing team.
I think by like year 3, I bought into it. It didn't happen right away.
But we got your marketing team to actually buy into it. And I remember that first year, we were probably in a room about the size of this little space with about 4 TV monitors. And we've grown that into a 50-foot by 20-foot tall video wall to manage the conference. But truly an ops center, truly getting decision makers in one space to make critical decisions when necessary. You had some leadership changes in the event side. What kind of pushback did you get? You helped grow a security posture for a tech conference to meet kind of a Super Bowl level. Took money, took resources, took budget. Talk us through how you navigated that internally to Salesforce.
I think 2 things come to mind with that. One, it was incremental, right? We didn't go huge on year 1. I don't think that would have resonated with them. We added some video on year 1. We walked through crowd planning. We talked about door opening procedure and the different, turning the faucets on and off from the different areas that we were letting people in, and having them in the room was the other part. Having them be able to sit there and see their entire event in one place, standing still. They weren't having to run from building to building anymore. We had radio comms with everybody. And I think over time, we got them to understand that there was nothing they couldn't handle from that room. They didn't need to be out running around anymore and seeing fractions of the event from time to time.
We're talking about what we've labeled Easy Day. And you and I have been in the trenches on some fun events in the past. In your history of doing events, talk about the toughest one you've ever had to deal with.
I really think it's that 2012 event where we had the issue right before we brought you in, and it was a mix of several different things. The production team wanted to get more creative with how we handled the keynote room and the stage. It was a long, narrow keynote room. We were getting more comfortable that we were building crowd plans and understanding the flow of what we wanted to do with it. But we created a situation where the doors into the room where the concert was going to be held that night were directly across from the stage, and we needed to push people out to the wings to get it to work. And we put some plans in place. We were comfortable. We knew it was going to be a lift, but we were comfortable with what we had. And I think the band was in one song in, and the fire marshal shut us down. And we probably had 7,000 people on the street, looking through the glass doors, wanting to come downstairs. And your heart sinks in that moment, right? Because you're trying to deliver this special program to everybody. And I think there was an opportunity for a lot of lessons learned. And we talked about, that one room mentality in the ops center, being able to see the event and handle anything that comes up. We were scattered all over the place.
Decision makers.
Exactly, right? I was at the bottom of the escalator trying to handle the security guards to close the doors, and my colleagues were doing the same thing with the other escalators. And really what it was is a fire marshal for the building. It wasn't even the fire marshal that was overseeing the event, but the fire marshal for the building came in. And he took one look at it and said, here's what we're going to do. And we came up with a quick plan and a path. Everything worked out fine. I think it would have been much smoother and much easier if we were all in a room with a true ops center with the cameras on. And also, I think there's an opportunity, some lessons learned during the planning process, that we have to create a safe environment where if people are seeing things that are making them uncomfortable, we have to make it safe for them to speak up, and we have to listen. And I think those were the big lessons that we learned from that day.
How did you apply those lessons going forward? Right, you captured them, you learn, but how do you ensure that those lessons get reinforced in your next year's plan or your next event plan? Because it could be a much smaller event.
Well, I think part of it is, the phrase never waste a good crisis or a good incident, right? So we definitely took advantage of that. Part of it was taking a look around the room and saying, okay, we thought we had good plans with the people that we had in the room. Didn't work out exactly as we thought. We need to get new people in the room. We need to up-level this program. You and I had that conversation. You came out the next year. And so it was an opportunity for us to just really take a step back and say, do we have the right people in the room? Are we thinking about this the right way? And then just constantly reminding folks that, hey, don't forget about last year. We don't want that to happen again. Here's how we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again.
But sometimes we overcorrect.
Yeah.
Because we get one incident, and then the next year's planning process is nothing but that incident, and we don't focus on what's new or something else. Like, talk to us about, like, how do you make sure that they try not to overcorrect, even though every executive in the building is like, make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I think part of that's our job as facilitators for the event, right? We want to have good security. We want to meet our goals from security, access control, safety, et cetera. But we have to facilitate it, and we have to facilitate the event the best way we can. And so it's about being thoughtful and not trying to come in and take things over. You work with your partners, understand what their hot buttons are for that particular event, understand where the areas that if you start to encroach, they're going to get a little uncomfortable, and just be thoughtful about incrementally doing it. I think the way we did it worked out really well. The next year we had you out for the assessment. The year after, we established an ops center. Didn't get a ton of traction from the events group, but from a security standpoint, we thought it was great. And probably 3 years later was the first year that we really started to get traction on that.
But I think it was the first year, might have been second year, I can't remember exactly, that we had the ops center.
Yeah.
And Mark Benioff came in.
He did come in, yeah.
One question he had: how many cameras do you have? I don't know. I said 20 or 30. I can't remember. He's like, I got more than that in my house. You need more.
It sounds like something he would say.
How has the field of security evolved over this time? And throughout your career, you've seen a lot of evolution, a lot of change. What do you see as the biggest challenges or opportunities for the future?
Well, I think specific to events, I think it's the thing that we've been trying to deal with is how do you balance the attendee experience against an industry that's getting more and more comfortable with enhanced security, right? And so we've talked about how when we first started doing mag and bag at events, we were creating some stress for people on the event side about that and the impact it was going to have. But I also think we had some leeway because we had never done it before. Now mag and bag is so normal. People experience it all the time. You have to deliver it quickly, seamlessly, and get people through. And so I think it's understanding the adjustment of the expectations that our partners in events have while we're trying to level up and drone detection and prevention, or robot canines, or all these other areas where we think we can help improve the security posture. What downstream impact is that going to have on the attendee experience?
And you've worked for some of the top technology companies. Do you think we're applying technology the way we should be? Should we be doing more? Are we going over the top? What's the feeling?
I think it depends on the company, but my suspicion is that we're not pushing ourselves hard enough, fast enough. I think we have to be uncomfortable to a degree with it. I've always tried to have one or two folks that are just focusing on that, and I want them to be out very forward and coming back with ideas that when we first hear them, we think that's crazy. That doesn't make sense. But then you start to dig into it. Okay, maybe we can do something like this. And so I think resources, time, effort spent on technology to help scale, to help automate, to make things easier for the guards whenever we can, only improves the experience and the product that we're putting out there.
You coined a term in some of those planning days way back when, and we were challenged to come up with metal detection.
Yeah.
And you looked at your partners on the event side, and you're like, we're going to break the conference. And I was like, I've never heard that before. Break the conference. That was a classic one.
Well, but that was also what the biggest lessons learned from that is one perimeter.
Right.
You can screen attendees once. When you start screening attendees multiple times, their tolerance craters.
Well, with the older technology for sure, because the lines, now we've got these advanced systems.
Yep.
So it does allow, but I'm sure it's still a challenge. But I think the experience of the attendees these days, interested in your view, it's an expectation now.
It is.
Yeah.
I think we have to fight the feeling that we're going to cause people stress by having a strong security presence. It's time and time again. We used to do surveys, questions on the survey specifically designed towards security, asking the guests if they felt like it was worthwhile. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive.
Right.
I think the opposite is true now. People don't see it. They start to wonder, are they taking it seriously?
Right.
And so I think we have to move away from that feeling that we're gonna cause stress, or we're gonna freak people out if we have law enforcement presence or if we have screening. They expect it. They want it.
Yeah. I mean, go back to when we first had the tactical teams there, and they're, fully. And I think the first year was like, no, just park the vehicle there.
Right.
And then we let 2 of them come out and walk around, right? And now it's like it's an expectation.
Yeah. And we were really worried what we were going to see from the guests. And
For sure.
It was positive.
They want the visual presence. What advice would you give someone that's, wants to aspire to excel in leadership in the security sector?
I think the best piece of advice I can give and the biggest impact that I've had in my career is be a good business partner. At every step of my career, whether it was a big promotion or a big scope increase or exposure, I actually had my business partners advocating for me more than my direct leadership. And it wasn't about my relationship with my direct leaders, but especially as event personnel, our event organizers spend more time with us than our leadership do out in the field. They see how we operate. Be a good business partner. Make sure your business partners are advocating for you and your career and how you want to grow.
It's a great answer. I'm gonna finish with this one. At Salesforce, you had leadership that really embraced security. Really, Mark wanted stadium level security at a conference center. You've worked with some other entities that maybe it's not the same. What advice do you give to that professional that is working for that entity that they don't take it, they don't want that security layer, they don't want the executive protection, they don't like these types of things? What advice do you give that professional?
I think there's a couple of ways to approach it. One is you want to talk about the risk, right? And you want to talk about what you're trying to mitigate and why you're trying to do that. And if we don't take these steps, here's what potentially is going to happen. I think there's also opportunities. I've paid for things out of my budget previously in events where I've been trying to get the event organizers to buy into something and I can't get them to do it. If I have the money in my budget, sometimes I'll pay for it for year one and say, I'm going to show you that this will work. I'm going to show you the impact that this will have. And then when they see it on the ground during the event, they'll start to buy in much faster to it than trying to explain it to them as some, idea that you have, right? And so those are two things: focusing on the risk, helping them understand the issues. I think talking about lessons learned from previous incidents and events at other events, where they can talk to their colleagues, would be helpful. I
appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Good to see you.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Dan.